Well, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you here tonight, as excited as anybody can be about anything these days. We want to welcome you to the Youth Mental Health Project Virtually Speaking webinar series, which we developed to talk to parents during the pandemic. We've got a lot else going on in the world right now, and so we have plenty to talk about in terms of our kids' mental health and our own mental health, which I have always felt is one of the most important public health issues of our time. And I'm really excited to have Dr. Lisa Rosen with us here today to share her expertise and knowledge with us. Dr. Rosen is currently the Director of Parent Support at Mountain Valley Treatment Center, which is a residential program that for ages 13 to 20 years old for kids between the ages of 13 and 20 who are struggling with anxiety, OCD, and other various mental health challenges. So we're thrilled to have her here. She is also trained in SPACE, which is a really interesting program for parents, which I'm hoping she'll talk a little bit about. And most importantly, she's a mom also. Maybe not everybody would say that's most importantly, but that's usually the thing I think is most important. So Dr. Lisa Rosen, we are so happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. And I am going to just a little bit of housekeeping, everyone, for those of you who are new to Zoom. Please feel free to send chats to me through the chat box at the bottom. Maybe introduce yourselves, say where you're from, and if you have any questions that you would like to remain private, you can use the Q&A and send me a private question. I will then funnel those questions to Lisa. I'll be keeping an eye on the chats and the Q&As so that Lisa can concentrate on sharing her knowledge, and then I will be passing those questions and comments on to Lisa. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. And I know Randy—
Lisa is either Lisa's frozen or I'm frozen. Oh, technology.
Can you not hear me or see me?
Lisa, are you there? Can anybody hear me? Because I don't know who's frozen.
I hear you. Can anyone hear me? I'm hearing you fine, Randy. Can you hear me? Let's see. You can hear me. Okay, so everybody can hear both of us except you, Rand. Randy, can you hear us? No. Let's try.
Hello, everyone. Is everyone still there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Lisa.
Randy, everybody can hear me.
There you are.
Oh, good. Okay.
I don't know if it's, you know what? I am going to have to stop my video. Lisa, are you there?
I am. Can you
I'm
hear
going
me?
to stop my video. I can't hear you. I don't know if other people can hear you. Oh, someone said they can hear us both. My sincere apologies. Just in case it's my internet, I'm actually going to move to another room. So I'm going to turn off my video, but I'm still going to be here. And maybe, Lisa, this is a good time for you to take over, if that's okay. Sure. Thanks, Debbie, for telling us you hear us both. Okay, I'm still going to move to another room because our Zoom has shut down several times. Go ahead, Lisa. It's all yours.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I know this is a really kind of odd
Lisa,
time.
I can't hear you. Can everybody else hear Lisa?
I think they're saying yes.
Okay, everybody else can hear you, so go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Lisa.
I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to share my screen and start a PowerPoint presentation to share with all of you. But I know that Randy did want to address, and I'm going to address, that this is sort of an odd time for all of us to be coming together to talk about parenting when there is, you know, this crisis on hand for all of us. And Randy and I both want to be as sensitive as possible to what you're all experiencing, and just to sort of put a shout out there to say that we share in the challenges that all of our friends, family, and people across the country are facing right now. We want to be as compassionate and kind and non-judgmental to everyone, recognizing that pre the current climate of unrest, COVID had all of us in a state of real distress. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about, but I also think it's important to recognize that this is also a brand new challenge we're facing that, you know, is not a part of this PowerPoint, and I just want to recognize that. So what I am talking about, though, does address this sense of unrest and uncertainty and fear in all of our lives that came about with COVID, and I think there's a lot of, it is all connected in some way. So this PowerPoint is really about how to parent in an era of uncertainty, of not knowing what our future will be, and worry, and how to parent our children as best we can. So I'm going to start the PowerPoint, and I'm going to share with you, to start with, my journey. So I am the mother of 3. My eldest son is 23, my middle daughter is 20, and my youngest daughter is 17 years old. 2 of my 3 children have severe mental health challenges. I used to share my story, and it used to feel very unique. I recognize now that I am sitting with an audience of parents who, all of you who probably also have children with mental health challenges. So while my story might not be unique, my path may be. And so what I want to share is that my 23-year-old daughter suffers from major depressive disorder, and my 17-year-old daughter suffers from severe anxiety and OCD and panic disorder. My youngest daughter ended up in a residential treatment program at Mountain Valley, where I now work. And obviously I did not work there when she went there, or maybe not so obviously. But she was a resident there about 2 years ago and had an incredible, formative, powerful experience there. And yet it was very traumatic for my husband and myself. And we felt that there was not enough parent support. And because I'm a clinical psychologist, because I've been working with families for a very long time, because I work with adolescents, the directors there hired me to create a parent support program. So at Mountain Valley, I wear 2 hats. I'm a mother of a child who was a resident there, and I am the parent support director. And that only matters because I think as parents, you can all understand how important it is to stay connected to the professionals who are part of our team. And so I play 2 roles there. I am both a parent and a clinician. And so tonight, what I want to talk to you about is what I've learned and what I continue to learn as a parent and as a clinical support for other parents about what we can do to help our kids in times of uncertainty. And certainly COVID-19 and the current unrest are times of extreme, unprecedented uncertainty. Randy, are you there, just to make sure you can hear me?
I am. Can you hear me now? All right. I just got back. I'm so sorry, everyone, for the problems. But thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you're saying and doing, and keep going.
Okay.
We are thrilled to have you with all the experience you have, both as a professional and as a mom. And like me, you are now in the business of supporting parents all the time. And I think I just want to comment that those of us who have been through what we've been through, where our children have struggled with their mental health, we want to take the time to help other parents, and because we know how hard it is, and it can feel very lonely. So thank you for the work you do. It's really very important work.
And a labor of love, as many parents that I work with understand. So, so much of what I'm going to share comes more from what I've learned raising my own kids, and then doing the hard work of understanding sort of from a more clinical perspective what needs to be done when we raise kids with anxiety and depression. Mountain Valley, just so you know, is primarily a treatment program for severe anxiety and OCD exclusively, with secondary depression. So just to clarify, Randy, because I know you said a host of mental health challenges, Mountain Valley is actually very tailored.
Thank you for correcting me.
I have parented 2 kids with very different mental health challenges. What I'm going to cover today is how to now support your child in this incredible time of loss and trauma for our children and ourselves, how to navigate the daily challenges every day, the stressors in this current climate of uncertainty and stress, and then how we can move forward for our kids, plan for a future when we really don't know what the future will look like. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Randy, I know you can relate to this, and probably this is not news to any of you, but if we are not our best, healthiest selves, we are never going to be the best support for our children. And so as hard as it is as moms and dads to take care of ourselves or to put ourselves first, ultimately, it is the most important thing that we take care of ourselves, that we prioritize our mental health, our wellness, in order to really be our most grounded selves when we're raising kids with challenges. So you've all, I'm sure most of you have heard the phrase, put your oxygen and mask on first. And so the first question to ask ourselves right now, today, even more than ever, is what are we doing to care for ourselves, and what kind of role models are we for coping with what's happening?
Maybe we could have the parents throw things in the chat about what they're doing, because I've heard this forever. Take care of yourself first. You can, and it's true, right? You cannot help your children when you're a mess and you're not helping yourself. That being said, how do you do it? When
I'm going to talk about that a little bit, Rand.
Okay, good.
About that, but I do think it is very unique to each individual. So it's really important, I think, more to turn inward before you turn outward. So, and we'll talk about that. But what works for me does not work for my child, does not work for my best friend.
That's a good point.
I am an avid exerciser. To me, if I don't take 30 minutes, and it's 30 minutes, I know those who have to run a marathon to feel well. I know those who have to have a glass of wine, and those who do yoga, and those who meditate. I cannot meditate. I wish I could. I'm working at that, but it's not my thing. So again, this is really about turn inward before you turn outward with your kids right now.
Right.
And so I'm not going to dictate all of the ways. I'm sure many of you have been on so many webinars about how to take care of yourself. And it's a very personal journey.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It really is a good point. The point is just keep trying things until you find things that work. And sometimes something will work for a while and then you have to change it and do something else. So that's a really good point.
The same way I will talk about when to know when your child needs more help, how to recognize when you need more, right? When you're not getting enough. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but now that it's come up, obviously, the great concern is, are you functional? Are you getting out of bed? Are you able to get dressed in the morning? Are you making breakfast for your kids or helping them to make their own breakfast ideally? Are you, self-care in terms of the most basic activities of daily living? Are you able to do those? And many people are not right now. And there's a lot of struggle with that. And there's a lot of fear. But ultimately, that's when it's time to reach out for help. When you can't get out of bed, when you find yourself, so irritable and so short-fused with your kids, which we're going to talk about.
Right. Okay. Great.
So those are.
I'll save my comments for when we talk about them.
Don't cover it, or feel free to keep interrupting me.
Okay.
Very comfortable with going back and forth.
Okay.
So how are you experiencing not just your own discomfort, but your child's uncertainties about their future, right? So Mountain Valley and the work I do typically is with kids who are adolescents going on to, high school and college age kids. So the future for these kids is very unknown. And so I'm not sure how many people in this audience have little kids. Much of this will be obviously applicable to them as well. But just thinking about, will my kid be able to go to college? Will college be an option on campus in the near future? What will high school look like? What will this summer look like, right? Will there be opportunities for my kid to get out and be with their friends this summer? Or, are we going to still be sheltering? Obviously, things are opening up, but what does that look like for each of you? And how comfortable are you with what the plan will be short term and long term? And what is your family's narrative? And are you open to changing the story? I think this is something, Randy, that you probably learned way back when, and I have learned raising my children. But there was a narrative that we had before, when my kids were in utero, of what our family would look like, what the path would be, how we would raise our kids, what our values would be. And it all went down the toilet really around the time my middle daughter turned 12, and things sort of went really off course for us. And so thinking about that narrative and what you've thought of for your family, and can I be flexible and change the story? Ultimately, the answer is we must be, right? Because we're raising children who are challenged, and we have to change the story.
I think that's such a great way to put it, Lisa, because I know that my son actually started experiencing very severe anxiety by the time he was 6, and was really barely functioning by the time he was 9. And so the morning of that, I really felt like I had this idea in my head of what it was going to be like to be a mom, and what my 3 kids were going to be like. And I had to change that story. As you said, I had to change the narrative in my head and accept that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and that was okay. And once I embraced once I accepted that really made all the difference for me. But it was a hard journey to get there. So I like how you say that, change the story. I like that. That's really nice.
Really, ultimately, it's not just your family's story, but your story within a community, right? So live, if depending on where your children are being raised, the community has a story, right? There's a narrative for our community. There was a narrative for my school of the path that most people chose and most kids followed, and my children were not following the path. And the bumper stickers on the back of my car were starting to look very different than my friends' bumper stickers. So I had a Fusion bumper sticker, and I had a Mountain Valley bumper sticker, and I was proud, and I embraced those journeys. But that takes some time to really be comfortable with that. And not everybody needs to be and put the bumper stickers there. I did, and I am a proud mom of kids with winding paths, I like to call them. Because
I like that,
yeah, I just think it speaks to my children's strengths, and they're warriors, and I'm proud of them. So, and so what I've learned, and this is what Randy mentioned, is that I am trained in SPACE, which is an acronym for Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions. It's a treatment program started by Ellie Leibowitz at Yale. It is a manualized treatment program for parents to treat parents who have children who have anxiety. And it is exclusively treatment for the parents. I'm going to talk more about SPACE, but I bring it up. Did you want to interrupt me, Rand?
No, I
just walking in the room and you're saying,
get
out.
I was like, no, go away. Right. No, I noticed something. Yes. Sorry about that. You see, days of being at home, you just never know what's going to happen, and you have to be able to roll with it. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but that was my sorry about that.
So SPACE, I'm going to talk a little bit more about SPACE treatment. What I will say, it is treating exclusively the parents and not the children, but the children are the ones who have anxiety. So it is not about blaming. It is about how different we can parent our children to effectively help them become more capable of living with anxiety. And that's ultimately what we learn, is that children with anxious brains, OCD brains, will always have anxiety and OCD. And it's like the parrot on their shoulder that they say, hi, I see you're here, and I'm going to choose to live a valued life with you here, and choose not to listen to.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Rand.
So you called it treatment, but it sounds like parent training in a lot of ways, right? And the reason I say that is, in the beginning, I would be really offended when teachers would say, oh, maybe I needed a parenting class, because I the way they said it felt very blaming. But the truth is, kids with anxiety and OCD and depression really do need a different type of parenting style that I found not to be very natural and to be very difficult, and that needed to be learned. And so that's what you're
not natural, it's completely counterintuitive.
right.
Right? Because our intuition is to protect our children from pain and suffering, and the training of space training, I love that you say that, is actually teaching us to allow our children to sit with their challenges and to sit with suffering. And it is very difficult. And further down in this webinar, I will tell you, it reminds me of exposure response prevention treatment for parents, because you have to sit with such discomfort and watching your child struggle, which is
so painful.
Very painful. So one of the basic tenets of space treatment is supportive parenting and what that looks like. And it starts with a very basic 2 components. The first is validating, and the second is confidence. For anyone who's been through dialectical behavior therapy, you know what validation is all about. And for those of you who don't, it's just what it sounds like. It is saying, I hear you. Doesn't mean I feel what you feel. I don't know your pain, but I understand how difficult it is to be in your head right now. Right. So the first piece is always validating. This is really hard. And the confidence piece, which is essential. And I often say to parents, we have to fake it till we make it, because sometimes we're not sure our kids can do it. And many of our parents, myself included, have been down that road of self-harm, of suicidal behaviors, even hospitalizations, treatment programs. So we may not be sure that our kid can actually handle the challenge, but it is so important that we believe in them and we convey that to them. So in the time of COVID, as things are very hard, our kids are being traumatized. Our kids have lost so much. This is a very real mourning and grief period for them, in different ways for each of our kids, but it is hard. And also, it's going to be okay. This will pass, and we need to believe that they can do hard things and get through this, and they will be okay.
Yeah, that's a really hard thing to do sometimes as a parent. We hear a lot in our support groups, parents say, well, but my child is so irrational. My child's so irrational. Why can't he just understand why what he's talking about doesn't make any sense? Right? And, or isn't, and we try to fix it. Well, what if you do this? Well, what if you do that? Or think about it this way. And sometimes there's no rationalizing, right? Sometimes it's just, I hear how you feel.
And I think you can handle this. So ultimately, I mean, it's like I fed this to you, Randi, to bring up, because trying to fix it is what accommodating is all about. So the next slide is about accommodation.
There you go.
Accommodation. And before I read what accommodating is, I will tell you that Ellie Leibowitz likes to say that the number of parents who are raising anxious kids who accommodate their children is, do you want to guess, Ram? The percent,
oh my gosh.
The percentage?
Not 90%? I mean, I was one.
100%.
How much?
100% of parents who are raising anxious children accommodate their children. So there is no judgment here. This is a reality of how we are trying to help our kids, and fixing it is one of the ways we accommodate. So what is accommodating?
Well, I was going to say, I think the way teachers would say it was, well, you're just letting him do X, Y, and Z. And that's the problem. And so when we hear that as parents, we might feel like, well, so what you're saying is I'm a bad parent. But it's what you're saying is you're
the most nurturing and loving of parents,
right,
who protect your child from suffering and who want to see your child not be in pain. By the way, I want to distinguish this type of accommodation from an academic accommodation, which is completely
Good point. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, because you brought up school, so I want to make sure people understand this is not the same thing as getting accommodations at school for mental or academic challenges. So accommodation is defined as adapting or modifying one's behavior, one's teaching style. This is if we're talking to some clinicians in the audience, a treatment approach in order to reduce your child's anxiety. So can instinct and intuition be in direct conflict with coping and resilience? The answer is yes. So our instinct and our intuition as mama bears and papa bears is to protect, to keep our kids from suffering. this is in direct conflict with how our children will heal from anxiety and the challenges they're facing. So ultimately, in order to create the most resilient kids, we need to stop accommodating them. And that's terrifying, which is why I call it exposure response prevention parenting. For those of you who are not familiar, the most effective treatment for anxiety and OCD out there is cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure response prevention therapy with what's called ACT as well, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. These are all big terms. I apologize for throwing them out there, but they're all very effective treatments for anxiety for our kids. And ERP really involves facing your fear and sitting with discomfort. And that is what reducing accommodations for parents looks like. And
it's really hard to learn. It's
really hard.
It's really hard it's not instinctive because we want to help. We don't want our kids to be in pain. I mean, I remember when my children were newborns and babies, and hearing them cry was painful to me, and I would do anything to help them. And so that instinct we hold on to. But when you have a child struggling with anxiety, as you've said, it really doesn't help them. And we think we're helping them. We feel like we're helping them, right?
Yeah.
In the end, they can't build their resilience if they don't learn to sit with the discomfort. And there's a very specific way of parenting that is learned. And I would encourage everybody to do research about this. And I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm trained in space treatment, and you can go on the space website and find clinicians locally that are trained. The training for clinicians to teach parents has been so well received. Ellie Leibowitz's program is sold out. The training for therapists sold out. So there are therapists pretty much everywhere in the country now who are trained. Because there's been a lot of research to talk about how equally Ellie Leibowitz and his team published research that shows that space treatment can be equally as effective as CBT, ERP, and ACT in treating kids with anxiety, which is remarkable, actually.
Yeah, I actually put the website in the chat for everyone if they want to copy and paste it.
The clinicians who are trained are on the website. Okay, so in this time of uncertainty, of anxiety, and when our kids' anxiety may be ramped up, it is really careful to not allow your feelings of worry, your compassion about your students' sense of loss and grief to lead to increasing your accommodations, right? To doing more for them, not asking them to make their beds, not asking them to do the laundry, not feeling they should finish their homework because you just feel so bad and the time is hard. And I'm going to talk about some other examples of accommodation in a second. What accommodating does is it reinforces your child's sense of how fragile they are, that we don't have faith in them, that they can't do it on their own, and that they're fragile. And so it is really important to sort of be paying attention to that behavior. Here are some common examples of what accommodation behaviors look like. And yes, we've all done them. Randy, I can give you examples.
I was going to say.
I often say no one would believe them, but then in my parent support groups that I run, our parents say, I'm the worst accommodator in the history of accommodators. And then we all share our stories, and they're all pretty much on par with one another. So an example of accommodating: going out of your way to avoid a stressful situation or conversation with your child, leaving them home when you have family plans, saying no to social invitations, creating safe play dates rather than encouraging them to outreach more, ignoring or avoiding an issue your child doesn't want to discuss, doing something for your child they're capable of doing for themselves, their homework, reaching out to their teachers for extensions, ordering for them in restaurants. These are just a minute amount of examples of ways to accommodate. I will give you my least favorite, most embarrassing example. I would set my alarm. My daughter was school resistant for 3 years before she was in treatment. And so I would set my alarm for 5:30 in the morning. I would get to Starbucks. I would get her favorite drink. I would come home. I would wake her with her Starbucks drink in hand. And then she would say, I can't get up. And I would wake her again in 15 minutes, in 20 minutes, in 30 minutes. And then I would brush her teeth and dress her.
And how old was she?
15 at the time. I would put her socks on. I would brush her hair and with tears the entire time.
Right.
And by the way, she had incredible support and treatment at home. So this was before Mountain Valley, which was where she belonged and what she needed.
I was going to
So
say that while and I've done all of the, I can list all of the things that I did, but what I hear from parents a lot, and also what I would have said is, you're right. I know I shouldn't do that, but now I'm stuck at home. I've got 3 kids. I have to work full time. And my 15-year-old, if I push a button, is going to explode and punch a hole in the wall. And I can't do it. There's only so much I can do. So, how do you?
So this is the reality that sometimes, while accommodation is never the right choice for your child's anxiety, it's often, unfortunately, the right choice for a family, right? So for a parent or for the functioning of the rest of your family, accommodating is always going to happen, right?
Right.
Ultimately, we have to figure out, and parents can work on, what accommodations can I slowly remove for my child while being able to get to work potentially and get the rest of my kids to school. And what can I tolerate, right? So that's what you're talking about, Rand. So at some, there is the reality when I said to Ellie Leibovitz, my kid was school resistant. She needed to get educated. What was I to do? And the reality is what you need to do was too difficult for me and I couldn't do it, which was to remove all screens from our house, turn off the internet, turn off hot water so that she could not shower or bathe for the entire day, because that she could sit in a bath for 8 hours during school, right?
Oh, it's so funny. My son was the opposite.
Right. Well, we see that too. But ultimately, she could have stayed home all day and it wouldn't have been difficult. So his answer was, it has to be difficult.
So it's interesting, though, because with my son, he also had what I call school refusal from a very young age. And he didn't care. I could take everything away from him.
Right.
And he didn't care.
And when we talk about when is the time for residential?
Well, ultimately he did. He spent 3 years in residential. But I remember one of the things that it took me a while to stop doing, and I'm hearing this a lot right now, is I stopped doing his homework. That was where I drew my line, right? I said, okay, I'm no longer going to sit next to him and spoon feed him his homework. At a certain age, he has to be able to do it himself. And I've talked to a lot of parents over the past couple of months who are really struggling with that. Oh, well, she'll fail. And I said, well, you know what? Then the school will need to see how serious this problem is and get you the help you need. I mean, you can't do it for them, right?
So hard. And
very hard.
So I guess this comes to my next slide. Randy, you're like feeding them.
I know, I like it. I saw that.
So expect resilience, and that's a hard one, right? And also accept distress. So I'm not sure, I keep saying I'm sure that all of you have seen this, but I don't know how many of you are on social media, but this notion that we're all in the same ocean, but not in the same boat. This was, obviously this PowerPoint was created before the last week of what's been going on, but clearly we are not all in the same boat anymore.
I'm not sure we're in the same ocean.
I'm not sure we're in the same ocean either. That's true. But in terms of parenting kids with anxiety, recognizing that the answers are not going to be the same for all of us. And kids' reactions to sheltering in place can be very different. I have my daughter who was at Mountain Valley, who went right to a boarding school intentionally because she knew she would not be her best self at home. She goes to a beautiful, amazing boarding school in New Hampshire, not a therapeutic boarding school. Being home for her is awful. I have my other daughter who suffers from anxiety, but major depression, and she's at Barnard, and she loves online schooling because she doesn't have to get out of bed.
I was going to say,
in the best place, she loves it. She said, Mom, if all 4 years of school could be like this, I would do great. So to challenge herself to get out of bed is what she has to do every day, and she does it beautifully, my middle daughter, but it's very different how each of our kids responds to this sheltering in place situation.
We've seen real extremes in our support groups. I'm sure you've seen it too, where for some kids, this is great, right? They love online because they don't have to deal with the social anxieties of leaving the house. And for other kids, it's absolutely detrimental, and everything in between, right? So it's
ultimately, so as I said, continued disappointments are building up, right? Camps are canceled, trips are canceled, school for next year is now going online for some kids. So
right.
it is a very real trauma for these
Yeah.
kids, and we need to be so understanding about how difficult this is, and empathic, and validating for them. So we cannot say, get over it, or this isn't that bad for you. There are other people who have it much worse. Of course, that's true. And also, this is awful for our kids.
Right. It can be both. I think that's such a great thing to say, Lisa, that yes, things are worse for other people. There's no doubt. I mean, we're seeing that this week very strongly. Yes, things are much worse for other people, but you're allowed to feel your pain too, right? Yes. And if being home and not being able to see your friends, or missing prom, or missing graduation is painful for you or for your child, they're entitled to feel that, right?
Yes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to help your kids now.
Great.
But yes, empathy, recognizing, by the way, for us as parents, also for our kids, this will end, right? We will find peace. Even in the last week, this will end, and we will be in a better place for this. I believe it. I'm not sure everyone does. But I think our country will come together, because there are more people who are compassionate and just want to make it better than there are who aren't.
I certainly hope you're right. Let's all pray for that.
So one thing we like to do is, I like to share with parents that it's wonderful to start making plans, not specifically for a date in the future, but for when this is over. What would you like to do? Let's talk about what we can do when it ends. I don't know when it will be, but should we plan a trip across the country? Should we plan to go hiking? Should we plan to shop? What would you, just starting to give your kids a sense of hope. And so planning ahead is a wonderful thing to be doing, because it also conveys to your child that you recognize there's a future that's going to be here at some point.
Would you suggest that parents who don't feel that way fake it?
I think they need to feel that way. And so if you're not feeling that way as a parent, then we go back to slide one, do some
self-care. Yeah,
because this will end and things will get better. And so if you, doesn't mean you're not terrified. It doesn't mean there's not a lot of pain here. And ultimately, we need to tap into our resilience as parents. I mean, if we are really in a state where, we need to get help. So again, Randi, thanks for that. Creating a home support team.
Right. Good.
Okay. So if you are really feeling very hopeless, and there might be some realistic, elements to your hopelessness, you may be without a job, you may be without income, you may be about to lose your home, your child may be, so there's some very real hopelessness out there. Reach out. Teletherapy is incredibly effective. And there's a lot of resources. There's so many webinars like this, Rand, and resources for parents that are free, that are incredible, and just, you can't do it alone. If you're in that hopeless state, you cannot do this alone. We have Team Kaylee, and we have I have teams for both my kids. So
I have multiple teams.
And for myself, So creating that can include coaches and guidance counselors and best friends and cousins and significant others and aunts and uncles and clergy. So make sure you create a home team if you are really in a terrible place.
Right.
What's important about now is being okay with good enough parenting. And I talk about this often with our parents, that it is so important to embrace a modified structure in your home right now. So many of us are seeing the families, we're doing puzzles and we're hiking together and we're going, we're doing our outings as a family and we're picnicking. A lot of that is not happening for a lot of us. And being okay with what's good enough right now is so important, to forgive yourself, be compassionate with yourself as a parent, and to let your kids know that you are being flexible with certain rules that you wouldn't be normally. These are, I hate to say it again, unprecedented times. And so we need to be flexible. And so if I say to my kid, I'm not going to make you eat dinner with us. She's the only one home in our house right now. My other two are living out of the house. She's had enough of my face. Imagine being a teenager. Imagine being a teenager who went to boarding school intentionally to get out of this town, away from her parents a little bit. And now 24/7, it's us. And so she doesn't want to eat dinner with me 7 nights a week. Would I allow that normally? No. But now, you know, think about when you were a teenager, how much time you spent with your parents during a normal school day. If you spent a half an hour at dinner, I think that was a lot.
Right.
And that might be your values and what you would normally do. But ultimately right now, I'm just being flexible and I'm forgiving myself for that. The idea of the rule of three has been so helpful for me. When you are allowing for a lot of flexibility in your kid's day and not putting as much pressure on the rules that you would normally have, there should be some rules that stay in place so we all feel in control. So the rule of three is pick 3 things with your kid, let them be an advocate for themselves, pick 3 things that are non-negotiables. In our house, it's certainly waking up at a certain time of day. And by the way, flexible, she doesn't have to be up before 10:30 for any reason. Okay, so 10:30, you need to be in the kitchen for breakfast by then. And so pick 3 rules that you all can agree on. So no media in your room after a certain hour is one of ours, right?
Mm-hmm. I love this idea. You know why? I think sometimes kids who are anxious, we give them too much to think about, too many, too many rules, right? And too many, well, you have to do this, 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 and this. And it's too much, I think, sometimes under regular circumstances or whatever that means, but, right? And I think it's a great idea also to work with your child and come up with this plan of 3, the rule of 3.
Is this something you can, and you know what, at some point we are the parents, so that rule is non-negotiable. You got to be up and out of your bed by a certain time in my house.
Right. Or go to sleep at a certain time, or take a shower every couple days.
By the way, that's one I would not encourage any parent to give. You need to be asleep by a certain time because you can't control that.
But you could say, all right, well, let's negotiate the time. I say 10, you say 11, let's land on 10.
You stay in your room and you can say no media, right? No screens, no phone, no nothing. But telling a kid they have to be asleep is, you know, it's unrealistic. So try not to set yourself up for that. Really, the 3rd rule for me is always 10 minutes of fresh air. She doesn't exercise. She hates it. I can't mandate that, but I can say, you need to be sitting outside for 10 minutes as long as it's not raining. So those are our 3 rules of expectations. Also 3 rules of enjoyment. So every morning we talk about what would you look forward to today? 3 things that you would look forward to if we can fit it in the day, which what else are we doing? Let's be honest. We're working, but we try to give our kids 3 things that they would enjoy. And it can be, you know, making her an artichoke. That's my kid's thing. Being able to allow her to, you know, connect with her friends in some way, having a friend outside, whatever it is, talking to your kids about what works for them. Encourage space and privacy. This is so important, to find a space that's theirs that you don't go intrude on. I think it's really important right now that they have a place that's theirs, because outside is not one of them, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing not all screen time is equal. So as hard as it is, and I don't know how many of you have done any research or been watching webinars about screen time for your kids, but ultimately almost everything they do right now needs to be on the screen. So it's very hard to ask them to be off as much as we'd like. This is how they socialize. This is how they bust the boredom. This is how they're schooling. This is how they're doing their homework.
This is how they're connecting with people.
This is how they're connecting. So again, be as flexible as possible and acknowledging this will not be the way it will be when things are not like this, right? I'm not going to say new normal. I'm not going to say back to normal, but when things are not
like the word normal
today, we're going to have to make new rules that are more consistent with our family values. Try to meet your kids where they're at to stay connected. So my daughter doesn't do puzzles. I love puzzles. She, you know, if your kids are on TikTok, make a TikTok. If your son is playing video games, sit there, watch the game, ask some questions, see if they're willing to tell you a little bit about Call of whatever game they're playing. If
Call of whatever.
I was going to say Call of Duty, but I don't know. I think that might be my husband who plays that game. So, but trying to sort of meet them where they are. So not saying, I want to play Uno because I like Uno, or I want to play Jenga. What would you want to do? And try to sort of tap into what they're loving right now, what works for them. A lot of stuff online is fun. There's a lot of cool things you can be doing, on and offline. So trying to meet them where they're at is really important.
It's a really, really good point about meeting them where they're at, because I think as parents, we know what we like and we think they should like the same thing. Like, I'm cold, so you must be cold too. Put on your sweater, right? And it's really important to try to listen, even if they're not saying anything, but watch and see what they're interested in, and try to engage without them being upset with you for doing that.
And there's the privacy thing in the bathrooms, and I respect that as well.
Right.
So now I'm going to tap into a little bit about like those really heated moments in the house right now. Yeah, they're really tough. And so the first thing I like to say is, and this is one of my favorites, notice behaviors, not words. And why do I say that? Because I have 2 children who have mental health challenges who often will say, I'm so depressed. I'm so anxious. I'm miserable. This is the worst. And yet both of my kids, fortunately right now, knock on wood, are getting up for school, are doing the work, are talking to their friends, are engaged in life, they're eating, they're sleeping. So I have to sort of try, and this is so important with teenagers in particular, to just see the behaviors and not get caught up in the words, even when the words are very angry. You're the worst. I hate being around you, even when they're super hurtful. So walk away from them, obviously, try not to engage. And that brings me to my second point. Check in before you dig in. So what does that mean? It means if you are feeling, for those of you who know the DBT terminology, in your red zone, dysregulated, super hot, whatever word you like to use for it, step away before you try to dig in with your kid. It is absolutely unhelpful when you are dysregulated. You are the worst person in the room to be supporting your kid and being healthy for them. So
check in means check in with yourself. That's what you mean.
Absolutely. With yourself. Am I in my sort of wisest mind to be able to help my child regulate their emotions right now?
I don't know about other people, but it seemed to me that I could be completely calm and fine, and my son knew exactly how to push my buttons. He knew exactly what to say, how far to push me till I just couldn't handle it, right? And I would just,
so
and I would lose it.
Right. So this is the key, is then don't dig in. As soon as you're feeling, then you have to what we say, pass the baton, right?
So
and
it took me a lot of years.
Or you call in your home team. That is the time to call the home team representative that's closest or easiest to access. So if it's a sibling, a spouse, a best friend, call in the resources, because nothing good is going to happen when your kid has pushed the buttons to that point, right?
And it took me years to learn what I used to call how to de-escalate. And really what that meant was when things started to escalate with my son and we would start, I had to learn how to back away and say, I'm going to do laundry right now and walk away.
By the way, as I'm sure most of you know, and Randy, I'm sure you've had this, how can you leave me? Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. You can't leave me, Mom. What kind of mother leaves their kid in this state of distress?
And the abandon, right? And I actually did something, I don't know what you think about this, Lisa, but when one time I came to this decision and I learned, and I shouldn't say I came to the decision, I learned through a lot of parenting classes and therapy and whatnot that I needed to do this, that I needed to walk away. And so one time when he was calm, when things weren't hectic, I said, it's upsetting when you and I fight, and I don't enjoy that. And I want you to know that I love you and I'll always be there for you. But next time it starts to feel like this, I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk away and I'm going to ignore you. And I'm not ignoring you because I don't love you.
So if you're upset and you notice that I'm ignoring you, I'm doing it because I've decided that we'll have to talk about this later. But you have to have that conversation during a calm time, because if you do it during the time that everybody's upset, it's just not going to be productive.
And one of the most important pieces of removing accommodations when you're learning about space treatment and how to stop accommodating your kid is that we always share with our kids what we're not going to be doing anymore.
Right.
Before the time comes. And
Or
that's
even
exactly that, Randy. So I am going to not do X anymore because I know it's not helpful to you. That doesn't mean, by the way, and I think this is further in this PowerPoint, doesn't mean your child's behavior is going to change. Your behavior is what you need to pay attention to. So that's one of the lessons in space treatment is you're not trying to get your child to change. Ultimately, your child's behavior
it did ultimately.
It does, but that's not the goal. The goal is you need to be different in that moment. So,
you know what I found is that it's not that it changed his behavior, but it certainly lessened the intensity and the duration of what was happening.
Oh, and it will ultimately teach them, right, that they are capable.
That we're not going to respond.
And they won't fall apart, and they will be able to manage it on their own, and that they're capable. So again, it's about not teaching them that they're fragile.
Right.
So when my kid says, you can't leave me, I can't do this, I can't, yes, you can, I love you, and I need to step away.
Right.
And so now this is preserving relationships is paramount. This is really, again, very specific to what we're doing right now in COVID, sheltering in place, being together all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another good enough parenting. You really just, in keeping the environment peaceful, sometimes pick your battles, right? So this is a time where you really want to pick your battles. It's not worth it. You want to preserve peace in your house right now. That may mean more accommodating, right? In the moment, we can tackle the bigger stuff when life gets back to some semblance of what we were used to. Now is not the time for that.
That's a really important one. I always say I want especially after my son turned 18, I wanted to make sure that he felt comfortable with me so that if things weren't going well, he would come to me. And I always had to think, I don't want to mess this relationship up. So is this the thing I'm going to fight about? Right? Because the relationship ultimately is much more important than X, Y, and Z thing that's happening right now. Yeah.
Yes. So how do we lean into the uncertainty of what's happening right now? One of the things to do is for your child to normalize the difficult moments. When your kid says, I am anxious, I am depressed, I am whatever, help your child recognize that's a feeling. I feel sad, I feel worried, I feel anxious, I feel depressed, but that doesn't define them. And so the more we can reinforce for our children that these are feelings, not who we are as human beings, the more we distance them from those feelings. So that's a great modeling to say, you are feeling this way, this is not who you are.
Right.
Reinforcing that anxious and irritable moments don't live long. And that's the truth. They pass, and panic attacks pass. So it allows for a little bit less fear in the moment when you know this will go away. Right. And thought diffusion is also just this idea of distancing your anxieties, your fears, these thoughts in your brain from who you are, and allowing yourself to sort of see them as the parrot on the shoulder, right? This is my anxiety. It doesn't define me, and it's with me, and I can choose to hear it and move on with my life, or move on with my day, or do what I need to do, or I can sort of be fused with it, right? Yeah. And it defines me. So ultimately trying to teach our kids to sort of see it as a separate entity that is a part of us, but not something we always have to listen to. That's what thought diffusion sort of is about.
Lisa, that's also part of cognitive behavioral therapy, right? I remember my son's, I remember when he was 9 or 8, he was in cognitive behavioral therapy, and the therapist would call them junk thoughts, trying to teach him what the thoughts were junk thoughts and just, causing him anxiety, and what thoughts were real thoughts. So
very important for both anxiety and OCD, because
Yeah.
OCD obsessions can be terrifying.
Yes.
And so thought diffusion is very important for OCD treatment.
Right.
Two of my favorite, and we talked about sit with it. So how do we practice distress tolerance for our kids, and how do we become models? Learning to sit with their anxiety teaches them that we're not afraid of it, right? This is my favorite, maybe of all my little mantras: be a bigger container. And I'll tell you that my daughter said to me the other day when I went in, and I said, "What's up?" And she said, "I'm just miserable." And I said, what do you need from me? That's my favorite thing to say, because it empowers her. How can I help you? What do you need from me? Not, I'll go get you this, but what can I do to help? And she said, "You don't have to do anything. I'm just telling you." So this idea of being a bigger container, just take it in and don't do anything with it. Just allow yourself to take in their discomfort. And that's so hard as a parent, but just sitting there. And she's learned that mantra.
Sometimes they just need you to listen.
That's
really, really hard, because again, getting back to when they were babies, right? We want to jump in and comfort them and fix them, and not fix them, but fix the problem for them so they won't be in pain. And I think that's really amazing. We don't recognize when our kids are younger and they can't really express it themselves. But as they get older, I would hear that from my son too, and he'll say to me, "Mom, I'm just venting. I'm not even looking for a response."
Right. Well-therapied kids have learned the language.
Right. Like, okay. Yes. And you have to bite your tongue and sit on your hands and let them express yourselves. And getting back to the slide before, that's what builds a trusting relationship. They're not looking for you. Well, they might think they're looking for you to solve their problems, but they're really not.
Right. And ultimately, even when they seek out reassurance from you to make them feel better, right? Ultimately recognizing that they are looking for relief, and it is short-term relief when you fix it for them, but it doesn't teach them that they're capable, right? So there's this idea of an anxiety spiral, right? Or an OCD spiral, where they're asking for reassurance to help. You help, the anxiety dissipates, everybody feels better in the moment, and it just gets worse. And that's the reality. It's never going to get better if we fix it for them.
Right.
So I just want to be respectful of people's time. So we're almost done, but it's 7. So I hate when I go over.
Oh, we could talk for hours though. I know. And I kept interrupting you. I'm sorry.
We're almost. So encouraging self-reflection. So I think that, it's really tough right now, Randy, obviously, to talk about silver linings and before this week, it was easier to talk about silver linings of COVID, right? And to talk about sort of what are we learning about our family values, about ourselves. And so I'm going to take this slide, with the caveat of saying we are in the middle of something very scary for all of us. But if we can encourage self-reflection in our kids, there's been so much value to this pause for our children. And if we can tap into their recognizing the value, we've all lived on the, treadmill of life. Our kids have lived in a treadmill of life. The stressors have been so real, the pressures of the world around them, the academic pressures, the social media pressures, and so much of it, right? How much FOMO is there right now when nobody's going out and nobody's socializing? So if you can help your child reflect right now before the world is opening back up, there's some really good questions to ask them. What have you learned about yourself now that you didn't feel the need to be at every party and at every event? And what do you want for yourself? And sort of living a valued life. So we talk about acceptance and commitment therapy is all about this sort of digging into what's important to you. And right now, if you can have those conversations, really often your kid does not want to talk to you about anything. But I find that sitting in my car is my best time when we're taking a ride to talk to her, because that's when
if you can go anywhere.
I just make her come with me to the drugstore. Right? We're going to the drive-through. We're just picking something up. Come with me. And ultimately, I can sort of weed in these questions. A lot of our kids' goals have changed, right? And as parents, so we talked at the beginning of this webinar about sort of being flexible and changing the narrative. Maybe college, maybe getting straight A's maybe is less important now than changing the world, right?
Oh,
Being
amen.
somebody, being an agent of change in my world, in my community, right? Maybe that's going to be more important than my ACT scores or than my straight A's.
Right.
And social change. I mean,
Well,
I think kids with anxiety, by the way, and depression,
mhm.
tapping into getting out of their own heads and being helpful to others and being an agent of change in the world has more value almost than the therapy my kids have had. So my daughter's been very engaged in a program in Ethiopia that she's working with and helping kids learn English. Those are the days when she's working with these kids that she has the greatest smile on her face. She's out of her head. So allowing them to contemplate that, what's important to you now? What's non-negotiable? If I want to go to medical school, I need to still get those straight A's. I need to do really well, maybe, right? So what are your non-negotiables that you're not willing to give up and not change? We talk about this often with kids who are considering gap years right now after high school. What resources are you tapping into that are helping you through this time? Is it your Zoom calls with your best friend? Is it a good book that has nothing to do with anything that you can, kind of get
And
lost
that's okay
in?
too. That's okay too.
Or is it a bath? Is it, my daughter's taken a lot of showers. What's helpful, and helping them to reflect on this can be something you can use as coping in the future as well, right? And what have been the most challenging things? What are the dynamics and what's happening for you that are hardest, and helping them to sort of do a lot of reflection.
So I know you're trying to get through all the materials, but I really do want to take this moment, since you brought it up, to talk about all the things that are going on in the world, particularly in our country this week. And for my son, I used to say, and I still say this, that he is such a sensitive soul. He feels 150% of what anybody else feels. And so times like this really charge him, and not always in a positive way. He gets very upset and very angry, rightly so, as I think right now there is a lot of anger that's quite justified. But he will take the world's problems on his shoulders, and that he doesn't see how that impacts him. But as a mother, I see how it impacts him. And I'm wondering, how do we allow our kids to discuss these very difficult issues, these very real issues in our world, and help them digest it and process it in a way that is healthy for them, and that encourages them to change the world, encourages them to be better and do things differently than generations have been doing in the past, forever. So
I think my answer to that is what I would say about almost everything in life is it's about a balance, right? So allowing our kids to sort of dig deep into what's happening right now, encouraging dialogue, but also encouraging balanced dialogue. If you're going to listen to one side, let's listen to both sides. Let's hear where people are coming from. And also, again, and this is a tough one for all of us mama bears and papa bears out there, distancing yourself from your child and allowing them to sort of look for resources outside of us. Often this is a hard thing to talk about with their parents. So talk to their friends. A lot of kids are super engaged right now in what's happening. And then shut it down. So, let's do something.
If you find it's generating negativity.
Everybody, I mean, I can tell you how many parents and kids alike I've talked to in the last 4 days that said, I can't keep the TV on. Well, don't, right? Update ourselves 3 times a day. And after that, shut it down. And, as long as we're staying obviously socially conscious and engaging in the conversation, and not sort of putting our heads in the sand right now, because that is really no good for anybody, but we need to find balance. So that still means it's okay to go for a hike. It's okay to read a book that has to do with nothing. It's okay to chat with our friends about fashion, or, play our video games, and then kind of re-engage. So really, in everything in life, it's about balance.
And I think remembering, particularly our kids who are a little bit older, there's a lot to learn from them, right? There's a lot to learn from, I know my kids are in their 20s. I have learned so much from them because they just have a different, their generation. I didn't grow up the same way that their generation is growing up with the social awareness. And it's been very positive for the most part. But sometimes,
Rand, I think also we have a lot of wisdom as well.
Right. And when I say positive, I just want to correct, it's been positive for me to learn more. Not that the situation
and
is
also
positive.
it is important that our kids recognize the wisdom of adults, right? And so there are a lot of adults out there right now who maybe aren't so wise.
Well, that's the problem, right?
But we are wise, right? And so tapping into those who we respect. I mean, I just got the most beautiful, well thought out email from our rabbi and from the head of schools from my daughter's boarding school. Right. I could read them over and over again. So sort of making sure you're listening to those you respect, right? And those who you think are wiser than you. But there are so many very wise adults out there, and our kids can get very caught up in the emotions of what's happening. Right. In a very, certainly our anxious kids and our depressed kids, it's a really hard time. So allowing them to speak to a rabbi or a priest or a mentor or a coach and talk to someone other than their parents can be super helpful right now. Right. So this is real quick, just to revise your next step perspectives. This is really about kind of our college age kids. So, kids who are kind of figuring out what's next for them. Be flexible right now. Recognize no decisions are irreversible. And that this will be then. That was my mom's favorite phrase in life. She's no longer with us, but this will be then was my mom's mantra. And I love it. And I live by it, that the hardest times they pass.
This will be then. Oh, I got it.
Then Kaylee says she's going to tattoo it on her arm one day. I'm a little.
But what's happening now is someday going to be yesterday. Right.
Exactly. Encouraging your child to steer their own ship. We're on our last slide. Encourage your child to steer their own ship. This is very hard, but recognizing age-appropriate ownership for what possibilities lie ahead right now. Support activation of their personal insights. We talked about this. And nurture their intrinsic motivation. Why do I want to be well? Why do I want to face this conflict? Why do I want to deal with my anxiety? I'd rather just stay in bed all day. Well, what matters to your child is what we need to tap into. So that's a lot about acceptance and commitment therapy, but it's very important right now for our kids. Yeah. Why does it matter? Why does it matter to you? Not to me, not because mom and dad took this path and you want to follow us or you think we care. What are your values and what are your vulnerabilities? So again, sort of helping your kids do some real self-reflection right now. This is the time for that. That we have. How to know when you need more support. We talked about this before, right, Rand? So ultimately, how severe is the distress and how much does it impact either your functioning or your child's functioning right now? What kind of home team are you able to assemble? If you don't have the supports at home, then you may need to look elsewhere. And sometimes as parents, we sort of tap into resources, we overdo it, right? So we ask our teachers to do too much or our therapist to do too much. I was on the phone with my daughter's therapist at all hours of the morning and night, 5 a.m. I called her when I was at Starbucks. What do I do next? That's when I knew that I had reached a point where my daughter needed more. And I was really, sort of overstepping, crossing the boundaries, and I had exhausted all of the supports at home. How do you know when residential is the right step? I don't know if that's a question your parents have. So if they don't, I'm not going to do it. Yes?
No, of course. Yes. No, I mean.
Okay, so how do you know? How do you know when all of these things have been exhausted?
Well, first I get, what is residential treatment? What does that mean? And why would you do that? And, which is the parent I didn't know what that was until I needed to know what that was. And, but then, yes, it's a really hard thing. And what I get a lot now, Lisa, is that some residential treatment centers have closed. And
there are a lot who are reopening now. So this is the reality. Most are reopening. And I will tell you this. My daughter was in residential for 76 days. Mountain Valley is a short-term residential program, right? So it's 60 to 90 days, mostly 90. It felt like a lifetime. Ultimately, it was in our rear view mirror. And now that I look back, it was the most important step she ever took in her life. She is braver. She has coping skills that I am so proud of. And it was because she left home and because she had to immerse herself in treatment. It is always a last resort. One would think. I have to say that my older daughter, who is, an incredible human being, she still says to me, I wish you had sent me to Mountain Valley. So, I mean, it's terrifying. It feels like such a major decision, but when you look back at it, it is a moment, a blip on the screen of a kid. If they are really, really struggling, and her world has opened up. I mean, she went abroad, my child who never left the house, last summer. She, the things she's done have been so remarkable, and it started with her time in treatment and residential.
Well, my son was in residential treatment for 2 years at very young ages. And I think we could do an entire very long webinar on residential treatment and IOPs, which is intensive outpatient treatment. And I think there's a lot to talk about because not everybody can afford it. Not insurance is difficult. School districts don't always want to cooperate, and not every residential treatment is created equal.
Well, for sure. Absolutely.
And so it's a huge conversation, but I will also say that the right residential treatment program for a child who is not functioning can be life-saving. And there's no question that my son saved his life. I don't know that he would be alive right now, to be honest.
And my daughter was very functional, but she was exhausted from her brain. And that's what she said. I'm so tired of living in this.
Yeah.
And these are just two of my favorite quotes, and we are out, although we didn't take any questions, Rand. So I'm happy to stay on and take any
questions. If anyone wants to stay on and ask questions, we certainly can do that.
So two of my favorite quotes from Wise Root Parenting. The outcome of parenting isn't children, it's parents.
I love that.
Much. All right. Your actions as a parent determine only one thing, the type of parent you are. What your children become is ultimately a function of their own choices and is only influenced, not determined by your parenting.
Those are great quotes.
And ultimately, we need to recognize our children are not us, and we can support, but we cannot create. They are who they are.
So true. So true. I love those quotes. We'll have to post those on our social media. I love both of those quotes, Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much. I think you went through a huge amount of material, a lot of great parenting tips, and my apologies for interrupting you, but our style is to be conversational as well. And I think sometimes I like to be able to ask questions of the professionals we talk to that I think the parents want to hear, and the questions that I hear a lot in support groups. So I think it was just really wonderful. We will, if anybody has questions, please send them in the chat, or you can do private questions, Q&A. Also, you can see that Lisa's, I was just looking at, someone was chatting me, her name is Laura. Lisa's email address is down there at the bottom, as well as her phone number. I hope those of you who are on know how to get in touch with me, but you can find me at the Youth Mental Health Project. My email address is, Carolyn, thank you so much, is in the chat box. And always love talking to parents and professionals, particularly during this time. There really is so much to discuss. It always feels like it goes by too fast, and there are so many wonderful things. There's so many wonderful ways we can help each other as parents, and that's what the Youth Mental Health Project is all about. Is how can we support each other as parents? This is really hard. It's hard to be a parent under the best of circumstances, but when you have children who are struggling, particularly with anxiety, OCD, depression, my son has a mood disorder in addition to all of that. It can be so lonely and frightening, and we don't have to do this alone. We can do this together. And if you want to join our support groups, we now have all of our the support groups for parents of the Parent Support Network are all virtual and available online. And they're free, they're confidential. Our calendar is on our website. We encourage you to spread the word. All parents are welcome. It doesn't matter what your concern is, all parents are welcome, because together we can help each other, and then together we can change the world. I really do believe that. So Lisa, thank you so much. I'm not seeing any questions. Except a great comment here in support of your boyfriend, who was from Anna Mitchell, who sent his son to Mountain Valley. That's wonderful. And we had another great question earlier from Debbie Berman. It wasn't really a question, which is why I didn't bring it up, but the idea that some of these kids who are doing really well now, when they go back to school, how hard that's going to be for them. And we'll have to do another webinar about returning to school and how to deal with the anxiety of kids who have school resistance and school refusal, and how do we help them get back on their feet. So Debbie, I did hear you. We will have to cover that in another webinar in more detail, because it's an excellent point. Lisa, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for having me. I love what you guys are doing there.
And this will be recorded, so hopefully we'll get it out on our YouTube channel soon, and we'll make sure you get a copy, Lisa, so that we can share the great information that you gave to all of our parents. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
But take care, everyone. Have a wonderful evening as best you can. Take a deep breath, and just want to say that, we see you, we hear you, and we are with you, and we are going to do the best we can in this very difficult moment. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.